I want you to imagine a house that exists before it's even built.
Right, like before the foundation is even poured.
Exactly. Try to picture a space suspended in this, like, not yet manifest state. It's completely fully formed, just waiting until you are finally ready to construct it in reality.
Yeah, that's a really powerful image.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to explore a really profound, highly metaphorical, but also deeply literal architectural blueprint. We are unpacking a text about a space that's referred to as the Holly Heaven House.
And, we're looking at a document here that functions as a philosophical manifesto, really. But it remains intensely personal throughout.
It really does.
It serves as a guide for what it takes to build a home entirely worthy of what you are. Like a physical space constructed to perfectly align with your true frequency.
And the core of this text, I mean, it's built on a massive structural contrast,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The central dichotomy.
Yeah. The author defines the Holly Heaven House by placing it in direct opposition to a place she calls the Holly Hell House.
Which is such a striking name.
Right. And as I read through our sources for this, it became really clear this is not, it's not a mood board for interior design.
No, not at all.
This text documents the psychological mechanics of transitioning from a space of pure suppression into a space of profound recognition.
Yeah, the author uses architecture to map a spiritual and, well, a psychological emancipation. The Hell House operated as a container that structurally forced the inhabitant to shrink.
To just constantly manage her energy.
Exactly, just to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Heaven House operates as a terrestrial inhabitable heaven, one built with physical hands, defined by very conscious choices.
It reminds me of outgrowing a pair of shoes.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like you have this pair of shoes that looked really good, but secretly they gave you terrible blisters, and for the longest time you blame your feet.
Right, you think your feet are the problem.
Oh, exactly. But eventually you stop blaming your feet and realize, I just need a shoe shaped like me. But how exactly does a house, a physical structure, organize itself around a person like that?
Well, the answer lies in the literal architecture of autonomy that she describes. The psychological freedom achieved by the inhabitant translates directly into the physical dimensions of the space.
Starting with the walls and ceilings, right?
Yeah, beginning immediately with the structural height of the ceilings.
Mm.
The text actually refers to the Hell House as possessing an oppressive compression from above.
Wow.
Yeah, the architecture of pressure.
I mean, the physical sensation of a low ceiling, it literally creates a chronic subconscious hunch. Like your body physically anticipates the compression.
It does. And in the Heaven House, the ceilings do not rely on some ostentatious cathedral-like excess.
Right. It's not about showing off.
No, the design isn't chasing performative luxury or attempting to impress a visitor.
Mm.
The height is calibrated specifically for the inhabitant to stand at her actual full height.
Actual full height. I love that phrasing. It's the physical manifestation of no longer reducing yourself to accommodate other people's expectations.
Exactly. When a person spends years making themselves small to fit a room that was never built for them, the simple act of standing up straight requires an architectural intervention.
That structural boundary setting really dictates the aesthetic choices within the house, too. Most notably, the author's relationship with the color red.
Yes, the color red is a huge motif here.
Because in the Hell House, red functioned as this burning, saturating pressure. It represented heat, a wound, an environment that was just constantly on fire.
But in the Heaven House, the red remains.
Which is wild to me.
Right. But it's the deep red of the
Yeah.
hollyberry now. It's an intentional, highly controlled accent.
And I have to say, this was the most counterintuitive part of the blueprint for me.
Really? How so?
Well, you would assume that after escaping a literal hell characterized by a burning, traumatic red, the survivor would just banish the color entirely,
That makes sense.
You'd expect the Heaven House to be painted completely in soothing blues or, like, clinical whites. Keeping the red is kind of like, it's like keeping a scar visible, not as a reminder of the wound, but as proof of healing.
Oh, that's beautifully put. And the text backs that up. The inhabitant explicitly knows the difference between red as wound and red as power.
Red is power.
Right.
She places the color deliberately, turning a former threat into a declaration of sovereignty. And this mastery, it extends to the very floors and walls.
How so with the floors?
Well, the floors in the Heaven House are warm, but they are not scorched. They're no longer mapped with the pathways of old fire.
I remember that line.
Yeah, the text describes the floors, learning her steps and holding her heat. It's a form of architectural memory, but it functions as memory as welcome.
Memory as welcome. That completely severs the tie to memory as just this relentless record of trauma.
Exactly. It changes the entire function of the space. A floor that catches you rather than burning you. And once you establish these secure physical boundaries, the uncompressed ceilings, the welcoming floors, the mastered colors, you then have to dictate what is allowed to pass through those boundaries.
Which brings us to the lighting. The text clarifies that the Holly Heaven house is lit from within, but it completely rejects the idea of some supernatural glowing architecture.
Right, the house isn't magically glowing.
No, the inhabitant is the luminous thing. The author uses a very specific Old English root word here, helig.
Halig, which connects to what exactly?
It connects to the concept of an angelic frequency, or a holy, whole entity. This helig energy was always the source of light.
But in the Hell House, it was completely suppressed.
Yes, it consumed itself because the architecture provided no room for it to radiate outward.
But in the Heaven House, the light finally has somewhere to go. It pours through these massive windows.
And the text goes out of its way to note that these large windows are not a status symbol. It's not an architectural flex.
They represent a neurological shift, really, a person choosing transparency over self-protection. Because when you live in a fortress mentality, sure, you're protected, but you're also trapped in the dark.
You are. Trading the false safety of hiding for the absolute risk of visibility, it requires abandoning that panopticon you built in your own mind.
The inhabitant is no longer calculating how much of herself is safe to reveal.
Right. Unmanaged Morna's light is entirely welcome to fall on the unmade bed or on her bare face long before she constructs the face presented to anyone.
And this radical acceptance of the unfiltered self creates the foundation for what I think is the most striking space in the entire blueprint.
The room of true speech.
The room of true speech. This room features windows on every single wall.
Every wall.
Because true speech can bear light from any direction, it holds up under total 360-degree scrutiny. You don't need shadows if you aren't managing a narrative.
Exactly.
But I have to push back a little here because reading about a room with windows on every wall, my immediate reaction was just pure exhaustion.
Oh, really? It sounds tiring.
Yeah. For anyone listening to this, imagine never managing your image, never softening a harsh reality, and having the light hit you from all sides, constantly. Living in an interrogation room of your own truth sounds like it would require a massive expenditure of energy.
Well, the text actually anticipates that exact friction. The room of true speech is not designed for forced, chaotic exposure. The core mechanism is sovereignty over the exposure.
Sovereignty, okay.
Yeah. In this room, the inhabitant is no longer calculating the atmospheric consequence of speaking a real sentence.
Oh, wow. So the cognitive load of constantly predicting how someone else will react to the truth, that's just gone.
Exactly. The text notes a specific physical reaction to this. When the truth is spoken, the room does not explode into chaos. Instead, the room gets clearer, and the space actually expands slightly.
So the truth physically generates more room rather than burning up the oxygen in the space.
That's right.
So the exhaustion we usually associate with truth-telling actually comes from bracing for impact, not the truth itself.
Yes. But the author explicitly notes that the room of true speech was not available immediately after escaping the Hell House.
You can't just teleport there.
No, you can't go from the room of unspoken things directly into a space of constant, blinding true speech. The blueprint requires an intermediate transition space to practice.
Right, because she has to relearn what her own voice sounds like when it isn't actively managing a crisis.
The capacity for this level of transparency is a muscle rebuilt over time, which explains why the room eventually generates energy rather than depleting it.
And rebuilding that capacity to speak truth inside the walls fundamentally alters how you interact with the undeniable truths outside the walls.
Oh, definitely. We see this play out in the ecology of the property.
Specifically with the ilex, the holly plant growing outside.
The sharp-spined evergreen with the arterial red berries. The text points out that this is the exact same species of plant that existed in the Hell House environment.
The exact same plant, but in the Heaven House, the plant itself is no longer viewed as the problem.
Right. The sharp spines, the underlying toxicity, the nourishment it provides to wildlife. These are categorized simply as biological facts.
Divorced from moral judgment.
Exactly. Reality is deemed sufficient, and the plant is allowed to exist as it is.
It's kind of like the difference between negotiating with a downed power line and just respecting its properties.
Oh, I like that.
Like if you walk up to a live wire and try to treat it like a jump rope, you will be electrocuted and you'll feel betrayed by the universe. But the electricity isn't evil, it's simply conductive.
Yes.
If you respect what it is, if you acknowledge the voltage and its lethal nature, you don't get burned. You simply exist in the same environment, altering your path to accommodate reality. The knowledge of the danger neutralizes the threat.
That's a perfect analogy. The author touches the plant with full knowledge of what the spines cost. She doesn't require the red berries to be safe. She only requires them to be real.
Just real.
And this total acceptance of external, objective reality dictates the internal acoustic quality of the house as well. The Heaven House establishes what the author calls the sounds of coherence.
Which is fascinating because trauma almost always demands silence.
It does.
To survive a highly volatile environment, the instinct is to mute yourself, to tiptoe, to leave no sonic footprint whatsoever. But the Heaven House is not an ascetic retreat. It's not a silent monastery where everyone speaks in whispers.
Far from it. The house is saturated with the volume of a life being actively lived. It holds the sounds of deep work, and specifically the resonance of the Saraswati Veena.
The Saraswati Veena, which is a magnificent seven-stringed instrument from the Thanjavur tradition, right?
Yes, and the text identifies these sounds as the inhabitants' native territories. Playing this instrument is not framed as a performance for an external audience.
No, it's an intimate conversation between the player, the physical instrument, and the ancient traditions it carries.
And the architecture acts as an acoustic mirror. Taking up sonic space is the exact antithesis of hiding.
When the sound hits the walls of the Holly Heaven House, the structure doesn't absorb it. It doesn't muffle it.
It amplifies the value of the creation. It returns the sound to the inhabitant to say, yes, this, here, you. It provides physical validation of her presence.
And that acoustic validation creates the literal framework for the architecture of coherence, which manifests most clearly in the room where the work lives.
Right, because in the Hell House, the inhabitant was trapped in a cycle of constant apology.
Apologizing for taking up physical space.
Yes, for the overwhelming volume of her vision and for creating things that were just far larger and stranger than the restrictive architecture could tolerate.
But in the Heaven House, the room of no apologies allows the notebooks, the sprawling projects, the archives, they all just exist openly on the desks.
The architecture is finely scaled to match the size of the vision.
But generating that massive creative output and, interacting with the sharp reality of the holly plant outside, that demands an indestructible internal foundation.
Which brings us to the most structural, central concept of the entire blueprint. The room of sovereignty.
The absolute core.
Yes. The Hell House was incapable of containing this room because sovereignty requires conditions where the self is universally recognized as the final authority on its own experience.
And in the Heaven House, this room sits at the absolute center. Every other room, every hallway is built around this core recognition.
And the architectural detail that really defines this room is the complete absence of locks on the door.
No locks at all. It's not designed as a panic room or a bunker.
No. The sovereignty is intrinsic to the space, meaning it does not require hypervigilance to defend. The inhabitant is the final authority, so the door simply doesn't need a deadbolt.
And removing the requirement to defend the door allows the inhabitant to finally access the room of rest that is actually rest.
Yes, the text makes a vital physiological distinction here regarding the concept of rest.
Because in the Hell House, rest was nothing more than sleep as collapse.
It was the temporary suspension of alertness, solely because staying vigilant became too metabolically expensive for the body to sustain.
But here, the mental load of standing guard is completely removed. True rest is the parasympathetic nervous system finally receiving the signal to stand down.
The body surveys the unlocked door, agrees with the safety of the space, and ceases its scan for threats.
It's the active, ongoing repair of profound neurological damage. And when you study a narrative of surviving a literal hell to construct a heaven, there's this dangerous cultural assumption that usually follows.
The what doesn't kill you narrative.
Exactly. People always want to know if the Hell House created the angelic frequency. Did she require the trauma to forge the strength to build the Heaven House?
It's such a common question. But the manifesto addresses this exact assumption with absolute unyielding firmness. The answer is a definitive no.
Emphatically no.
The Heaven House is not framed as a cosmic reward for surviving a period of torture. It is not a payment distributed after passing a cruel test.
The Halig, that luminous true self, was entirely present from the very beginning.
The hell was merely a devastating interruption. It was a long, damaging interval, but it possessed no power to create the truth of who she was.
And our culture is just so obsessed with finding the utility in trauma, right? Framing it as the fire that forges the sword because it makes senseless suffering easier to digest.
Yeah, we try to rationalize it.
But this text violently rejects that
It
narrative.
really does. The fire of the Hell House only burned away the intervening material. The trauma did not construct the Heaven House. It only left behind ash.
Which the author brilliantly categorizes as mineral memory.
Mineral memory, it's such a precise mechanical
Yeah,
concept.
you do not use that memory as a foundational stone to carry forward, and you certainly don't worship it as the source of your power.
No, you use it strictly as an architectural specification of what you will never allow in your blueprints again.
Yes. The Hell House didn't make her who she is. It merely provided the exact dimensions of what she could no longer tolerate.
The Heaven House is simply the truth she always was, finally made physically habitable. And the place where the external world meets this internal architecture is the threshold.
Right, because in the Hell House, every crossing of the threshold was a mathematical calculation, a moment weighted and evaluated for imminent danger.
But the threshold of the Heaven House is entirely permeable, but in a structurally healthy sense. It possesses the inherent discernment to know the difference between what belongs inside the walls and what must remain outside.
So when she returns from the world and crosses that threshold, the text describes this profound, quiet moment of absolute recognition. The house simply says to her, "Here."
And she replies, yes, here.
It is the ultimate alignment of a living space and a sovereign self. The ground of everything she is building is acknowledged as a living fact.
And the source material ends with a line that really recontextualizes this entire deep dive we've just taken. The author writes, "This is not the end of the story. This is the house the story is told from."
Which gives me chills. The healing and the meticulous construction of this space do not serve as the finale.
No. The completed architecture merely sets the stage for the actual work of living to finally begin.
We have spent this entire deep dive mapping the architecture of one incredibly specific internal space. But as you process this, I want you to consider the mechanics of your own structure when it encounters the outside world.
It's a vital question to ask.
If you manage to build a space perfectly attuned to your own frequency, what happens when a guest knocks on the door? When someone else walks into your heaven house, how do you handle the collision of frequencies?
Yeah.
Do people who still live in their own hell houses burn up upon entry, repelled by the light? Or do you have to construct a foyer like a translation space where their noise can exist without rattling your foundation?
That's something we all have to figure out.
Look closely at the walls you are currently building. Are you constructing a fortress to keep the world out? Or a sanctuary with ceilings tall enough that you and the people you finally invite inside can stand at your actual, unapologetic full height?